La Légende des Siècles is a collection of poems by Victor Hugo, conceived as an immense depiction of the history and evolution of humanity. Written intermittently between 1855 and 1876 while Hugo worked in exile on numerous other projects, the poems were published in three series in 1859, 1877, and 1883. Bearing witness to the unparalleled poetic talent evident in all Hugo's art. The Légende des Siècles is often considered the only true French epic and, according to Baudelaire's formulation, the only modern epic possible. The dreaming poet contemplates the wall of the centuries, indistinct and terrible, on which scenes of the past, present and future are drawn, and along which the whole long procession of humanity can be seen. The poems are depictions of these scenes, fleetingly perceived and interspersed with terrifying visions. Hugo sought neither historical accuracy nor exhaustiveness. Rather, he concentrated on obscure figures, usually his own inventions, who were incarnated and symbolized their eras. As he proclaims in the preface to the first series, this is history, eavesdropped upon at the door of legend. The poems, by turns lyrical, epic and satirical, form a view of the human experience, seeking less to summarize than to illustrate the history of humanity, and to bear witness to its long journey from the darkness into the light. Origin. La Légende des Siècles was not originally conceived as the vast work it was to become. Its beginning, the original seed, was in a vague project entitled Petites, which features in the notes and jottings of Hugo from 1848, and which gives no indication of so vast an ambition. After Les Châtiments and Les Contemplations, his editor, Hetzel, was perturbed by the submission of La Fin de Satan and You, both of which were nearly complete. Seeing that Hugo was ready to proceed yet further down the metaphysical road mapped out by the final Contemplations, Hetzel became anxious at the probability of the failure with the public, and preferred the sound of the Petites which Hugo had mentioned, feeling they would be more in harmony with the spirit of the times. Even though these epics were still no more than sketches, in March 1857 Hetzel wrote to Hugo rejecting Fin de Satan and You, but accepting with enthusiasm the Petites Epopées. This new commission was nevertheless transformed by the influence of Hugo's latest ideas and most recent works, created with the same dash and fire and in a sort of magma of inspiration, a mixture of poesy, mysticism and philosophy which is characteristic of Hugo's first decade of exile. This inspiration normally led him to write a large number of poems, more or less brief, which would finally be published as components in projects which were constantly shifting and evolving. In this case Hugo integrated the little epics into his poetical system by casting them as the human panel in a triptych of which God and Satan were the wings, with the implication that they were merely sparse fragments stolen from a greater epic, the whole of human experience itself. On the 11th of September 1857 Hugo signed a contract with Hetzel, reserving the right to alter the project's title. Later Hetzel pronounced himself willing to publish La Fin de Satan and You, but Hugo, perhaps conscious of the difficulties of completing either to his satisfaction, had by that time thrown himself entirely into the new project. He began by taking the French Revolution as the turning point in human history, intending to use a poem entitled La Révolution as a pivot around which Le Pitié Suprême Le Verso de la Page would revolve. More titles were written down, but some were discarded or greatly altered, and the section dealing with the 19th century coalesced as LOCEAQTN, La Révolution, Le Verso de la Page, Le Pitié Suprême, Les Pas Ouvragens, L'Épopée de Lane, Hetzel followed this evolution with alarm, and, fearing that the great philosophical questions would turn these little epics into towering giants, endeavored to temper Hugo's ardor. After a serious illness in the summer of 1858, Hugo tried to reassure Hetzel by writing in a more straightforwardly narrative vein, and modified his plans, but retained the general ambition, which he declared in a preface. He had hit on the idea of publishing in several installments, to give himself more time and space within which to work. The title was not decided on until a month after the manuscript's submission. With his gift for phrases, Hugo came up with La Légende des Siècles. Petites Epopées was kept as a subtitle. First series. The first series was published in 2 volumes on 26 September 1859 in Brussels. In exile, Hugo dedicated it to his home country, Livre qu'un vent importe en France, où je suis un écoute. L'arbre déraciné dans sa feuille morte. The framing of the series is resolutely biblical, opening with Eve and closing on La Trompette du Jugement. The classical world is largely forgotten. Several poems dating from 1857 to 58 were set aside for a future continuation. Contents: Preface. I. Dever J. Acutes Us. 2. Decadence de Rome. 3. L'Islam. IV. Le cycle héroïque création. V. Les Chevaliers errants. Vi. Les Trônes d'Orient. 7. L'Italie. Ratbert. 8. Sixième siècle. Renaissance. Paganisme. Ix. Les Roses de l'Infante. X. L'Inquisition. She. La chanson des aventuriers de la mer. 12. Dix septième siècle. Les mercenaires. 13. Maintenant. 14. Vingtième siècle. 15. Or des temps. New series. Work on the second series began immediately after the first, but Hugo was soon busy with Les Miserables and with completing La Fin de Satan and You. In 1862, with the publication of Les Miserables, Hugo reviewed his earlier plan and gathered together the poems already written. Lane, Les Sept Merveilles du Monde, La Révolution, and La Pitié Suprême. Again, he delayed work for the sake of novels. In 1870, a decisive moment came, when Hugo decided to keep La Révolution for the future collection Les Quatre Vents de l'Esprit, and to fuse together La Légende, Dieu and La Fin de Satan, according to the following plan. La Fin de Satan, first book, L'Océan Elkis, La Vision de Dante, Les Religions, La Pitié Suprême. Current events in the 1870s, however, saw upheavals in Hugo's life, and he was once more greatly involved in politics. La Nouvelle Série was finally published on the 26th of February 1877, Hugo's 65th birthday. Most of the contents date from 1859 and 1875 to 1877, and the events of the 1870s make themselves felt. The Paris Commune, the fall of Napoleon III, and the beginnings of the Third Republic. The collection closes with the formidable abîme, a vertiginous dialogue between man, earth, sun, and stars, playing on the numberless steps leading to an infinity behind which stands God, and placing human beings, with all the pettiness, face to face with the universe. Contents: La vision du est sorti ce livre. I. La terre. 2. Suprematie. 3. Entregant c'est Dieu. IV. La ville disparue. V. Après les dieux, les rois. Vi. Entre lions et rois. 7. Le cid exilé. 8. Wealth, Castellan d'Osbor. Ix. Avertissements et châtiments. X. Les sept merveilles du monde. She. Le repopé du ver. 12. Le poète verditaire. 13. Clarté d'âmes. 14. Les chutes. 15. Le cycle pyrénéen. 16. Le cometa. 17. Changement d'horizon. 18. Le groupe des idoles. 19. Tout le passé et tout l'avenir. XX. Un poète est un monde. 21. Le temps présent. 22. Le legs des effets ux. 23. Les petits. 24. Le haut. 25. Les montagnes. 26. Le temple. 27. L'homme. 28. Abîme. Last series. The new series had been advertised with the following message: Le complément de la légende des siècles sera prochainement publié, à moins que la fin de l'auteur n'arrive avant la fin du livre. On the 9th of June 1883, the fifth and last tome of La Légende des Siècles was published with the subtitle Serrely Complémentaire. Critics who claimed that the anti-clericalism and glibness were evidence of the bitterness of age were mistaken. In fact, Hugo's cerebral edema of June 1878 had already essentially put an end to his work as a writer, and most of the contents dated from long before. It is probable, but not certain, that he had intended to write new poems. For example, La Vision de Dante was initially intended for Chattermonts, and Les Quatre Jours d'Elquis was bumped forward from both the first and the new series, the prologue dating from perhaps 1880. This assemblage of poems with little narrative drive, alternating dark and bright visions, gives the impression of a contemplative and intemporal epilogue, very different from what came before. Contents: Je ne me sentais plus vivant. I. Les grands lois. 2. Voix basses dans les ténèbres. 3. Je me penchai. IV. Mansuétude des anciens juges. V. L'échafaud. Vi. Inferi. 7. Les Quatre Jours d'Elquis. 8. Les Passants au bord de la mer. Ix. Les Esprits. X. Le Béatrage. She. La Chanson des Doreurs de Proès. 12. Ténèbres. 13. L'amour. 14. Rupture avec ce qui amoindrien. 15. Les paroles de mon oncle. 16. Victor Hugo mort. 17. Le cercle des tyrants. 18. Paroles de Gequant. 19. Contemplates. XX. La Vision de Dante. 21. Du fait les questions. 22. Ocequan. 23. Oh Dieu, don't la Virginia plus loin que notre rive. Collected edition. In September 1883, several months after the appearance of the last series, a complete edition was issued in which the three series are mixed together and reorganized according to a more or less chronological plan. No one is entirely sure how close this comes to Hugo's original vision. It is not impossible that Hugo, physically and intellectually enfeebled and greatly affected by the death of Juliette Drouet, allowed himself to be overly influenced by friends and by the executors of his estate. The rearrangement, which tries to make things easier for the reader by alternating long and short poems, and poems with different moods, has the effect of erasing the internal logic. In particular, the references to current affairs that are found in the new series are dispersed. Additionally, it introduces bizarreries of chronology. Greek mythology is depicted after Jesus Christ, and El Cid appears before Muhammad. Finally, it often gives the reader the erroneous impression that this final fusion was what Hugo originally intended, as though the original appearance in series were a historical accident. Nevertheless, most modern editions adopt this arrangement for the sake of simplicity.